What's up guys, Andrew here on my channel GearedInc, where I get to share what I'm passionate about with you. And on my channel that's PC Tech, Games, and Gear. This is my first video of 2018. I'm going to go slow since most of you are probably sleeping off hangovers from yesterday. But as far as for just kind of a thought before we get into the topic of today's video, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who's making my channel a success. A couple big things in my life happened in 2017. By far the biggest is my son was born. You know, he's 4 months old now. I'm so enjoying being a dad. I look so forward to seeing him to continue to grow into 2018. And then I started this YouTube channel, and realistically about 6-7 months ago I had gotten inspired to just do something. I've been wanting to do something like this for so long, and hopefully one day this is all I'll do. But for the time being, it's just fun to share videos and share my passion, and you know, for those of you who enjoy it, to share it with me. So thank you to everyone who helped my channel grow in 2017. Thank you for your continued support and feedback. I can't tell you how much that means to me. Realistically, you know, nothing's been possible without you guys, and while my channel's still small, I'm going to continue to work at it. We're going to continue to grow, and so thank you so much for everything all of you guys and girls have done. So as far as the topic of today's video, now that we've gotten that out of the way, we're talking about resolution versus settings. This is something I think that's very prevalent going into 2018. For the first time, we have consoles that are capable of 4K gaming. Now, obviously, if you're a 4K gamer on a PC and you have high-end equipment, you know that the experience is going to be very different. And one of the things that's kind of interesting now is you're starting to see these builds come out, which they're, you know, very low-end CPUs, but with very high-end GPUs, because when you're talking about 4K gaming, you don't really need a strong CPU to game at all. In fact, since the bottlenecks pushed onto the GPU, I've seen people doing things like Pentium builds, where they're throwing in like a 1080 or even 1080 Ti, and they're able to game at 4K at a pretty consistent rate. Now, this video has to be taken with a grain of salt, because the X factor that would make this whole series of tests null would be refresh rate. If you have never experienced a high refresh monitor, it trumps really any resolution setting that you're going to play with above 1080p. I would much rather play at 100 FPS and 1080p Ultra than 4K, you know, 60 FPS, and that's because the refresh rate really changes the gaming experience, probably more than any other single factor when you're talking about just gaming. However, obviously, there's no monitors out that can even game at, you know, above 60 FPS for 4K refresh rate. There's one that's been built, but it's probably gonna be like $2,000 when they finally release it. It's like a 40 hertz panel, and it's not really realistic for most people. So the point of this test is to take a look at basically 1080p at either high or ultra settings, you know, pre-settings, or 4K to get 60 FPS consistently, which is medium to low with the 1080 that I have. So it's one of those things where some of the tests was interesting. What was fascinating to me is that I blocked it at 60 FPS, right? Use the same monitor. I'm gonna go over all the hardware and stuff in a second. I'm gonna list it all down below. But it's interesting because when I was doing these tests, I was finding that even though the 4K was technically a lower you know, settings, the resolution far outweighed the settings at 1080p, at least for the experience I was having, because I was getting 60 FPS consistently. So to start off with all these games, I just found, you know, the settings, at least for 4K, where I was getting at least 60 FPS consistently, and I wasn't dipping down, you know, below that really in any gaming scenario. So I did that. And then in terms of testing hardware methodology, we've got my 4K Seiki Pro. That's the one on this side. So that is a 4K native monitor, 60 hertz TN panel. We also have my Ryzen 7 overclocked at 3.8 because I didn't win the Silicon Lottery. It was kind of a disappointment with that. I'm going to list all my hardware specs below, and the other important piece of this is 16 gigabytes of 3200 RAM overclocked to 2993, and then my GTX 1080, which is currently not overclocked. So the point of this, again, is to kind of show a comparison side by side if 4K at lower settings makes a bigger gaming impact, or graphically, experience, whatever you want to say, over 1080p ultra high. The other caveat with this is obviously you're only going to be able to see a certain graphical level if you don't have a native 4K screen at home. If you don't have a 4K monitor, 4K TV, they're probably going to look similar to you, if not outright the same. But at least this gives a comparison, so down the road, if you do end up getting a 4K, you know, monitor or TV, you can actually see the comparison side by side. And I think it's a good video to start the new year with anyway. So let's dive right into it. So the first title we're starting off with is a very highly optimized game, Overwatch. Now, this is not necessarily the best, example or game to use because it's so well optimized, and honestly, it's not graphically intense. I was able to jack it up all the way to ultra, but I have it on medium and still keep 60 FPS even at 4K. But in terms of even the little things, it's really you're not going to notice an enormous difference because the game looks great pretty much at any resolution, and even though the devil's in the details, you're not going to really lose out on a gaming experience 4K versus 1080p because this is not a game that's really designed to to either push that envelope. It was, it's more designed to have the most amount of people be able to play it, which honestly, in my opinion, are the best type of games. So either way, you can kind of see a side comparison here. Now, and that was at a medium preset, and then obviously ultra for Overwatch at 1080p. Moving on to Arc. I wanted to test a indie game, something that's been optimized but still isn't perfectly optimized. And what's interesting is that in certain areas, as far as if you're looking kind of the leaves and things like that, there's crisper quality at the 1080p because I'm able to use settings that I'm not able to use with the 4K settings for Arc. But even so, the overall graphical impact of being at 4K means that graphically it felt better overall, which that was my personal experience. Your miles may vary, but that's kind of the feeling I got, even though it was at a lower setting. Now, moving on to Star Wars Battlefront 2, this is again a very highly optimized game. This was an instance where I absolutely felt that 4K made a huge difference. Now, that could be because they were pushing that with the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, but it definitely, even with all the settings high at 1080p, 4K felt better. It looked better in my opinion. It was kind of interesting in terms of knowing that even though I was getting that 60 FPS consistently across the board, that the 4K at lower settings felt better overall. Battlefield 1, this is another game where again I felt that with 4K it did feel better. Now again, this can be because the style of game, it can be because the optimizations for the game. There's a lot of factors to take into consideration, but the 4K looked better in my opinion than the 1080p did. And in the 1080p in these both games, it started to feel a little washed out when I went down in resolution. And it's kind of like going from a high refresh to a low refresh. Even though the settings aren't as high, you're still losing pixels per square inch, and even though with the resolution loss, the settings don't nearly bridge that gap as much, because we have to remember that when you're talking about settings, the reason you do it is to improve the quality look of the game. But if you're increasing the resolution, that can trump the settings in certain scenarios because you're getting more pixels per square inch, which is helps because that's the point of like anti-aliasing and things like that. Now, the final game obviously that we are testing is PUBG, the worst optimized game ever. Probably not, but I mean, it may very well be. And if you take these two side by side, again, you're getting more details at 1080p and the grass and the trees, things like that. But overall, the image and the quality for 4K seemed better. Even in combat situations, it felt crisper, and I can only attribute it to kind of going from 4K to 1080p, losing things that maybe I'm not even knowing I'm losing. Like my brain knows I'm losing it, but I don't really, I'm not realizing it until I don't have it anymore. So there you go, guys. That's a side-by-side comparison of a couple of games I wanted to test to get a feel, because whether you like it or not, the industry is going to 4K. It's something that me and my best friend talk about a long time, because he doesn't like the way everything is so spread out and everything's so much smaller. He likes the ratio at 1080p. I completely understand. And honestly, it's not like there's a big reason to make the jump yet. It's still way too expensive on most ends, unless if you are building a entry-level 4K gaming machine. Look on YouTube. There's a ton of videos of people who are putting together these 4K gaming PCs that are getting as many frames as the Xbox One X's and things like that. And I promise you that if you're going to be spending $500, put it in a PC, you're not going to regret it. There's so much more you can do with a PC over a console. That's just my personal opinion. But anyway, guys, here's the 2018. If you like this video, leave me a big thumbs up. If you didn't, go ahead and leave me a thumbs down. Get subscribed either way. I want to hear back from you. Once more, thank you for everyone's support. And whether you watch my videos or not, I'm going to keep making them anyway. We hope to see you next time here on GearedInc.